I suspect it started when we realized we would die. Or maybe it was something more innocuous and hazy. When we recognized the future, perhaps, or simple possibility. Or maybe it was even earlier, when those things were but foggy intuitions. Maybe it started with something like the sun, or day or night, or moon or stars. Probably fire was involved. Firelight, as we looked up and outwards in the night, and realized what it was to be alone, to be uncertain, to want something in that wild darkness, to want continuation, to maintain somehow a structure against this ever-pressing entropy that dominated nature. It wasn't named entropy yet, of course. It wasn't even named. It would come to be known as chaos, in its earliest and perhaps most profound form, but for now it was still simply nature, so self-evident and fundamental, so all-encompassing. It was not conceived of as a thing. It was predator and thirst, it was starvation, ostracization, madness and war, and broken legs, and sickness that came from nowhere to seize and set a strong man trembling. It was the uncertain, hiding in the darkness, a narrow trail through the jungle with death on every side. Death, yes. Yes, death is always there at the beginning, one way or another. When we woke up and we realized we would die, that was when we stopped being creatures of instinct and we started something else. Pattern seeking, extrapolation. The world of abstract was born, and it would become what made us human. We would cease our bit-like reaction, input-output, in the unthinking impulse of the animal. We would become meta-attenders, mappers, simulators. We are those who pluck patterns from the tapestry of nature, but we are not only plucking, we are weaving, we are imagining, and in imagining, we actually create. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, because there's 1,000 monsters in the jungle, and 1,000 possible trees for them to crouch behind. Yet that one path, that sliver that brings us forward from starvation into fullness, from darkness into firelight, from solitude into community, that path too is possibility. So how to recognize it? How to recognize it when we wake up to this reality of uncertainty, of future, when we know that we will die? As I said, perhaps we started with the stars and firelight. In the darkness, when the outer world loses shape, when there's only the landscape of simulation in the mind, when there's only afterthought and forethought, waiting for the dawn. Then we shared our thoughts with language, an experimental web between us. It was something more than instinct, more than the private simulation of the mind, but it was something less than the concrete absoluteness of the day, with its sweating and its hunting and its drinking and its bleeding. It was something in between, this language painted in the dark, postulating in our creativity, drawing threads across those twinkling nodes, weaving and binding concept in the space between. So it started in the space between death and the stars, between us and the stars, and between us and each other. And there we gave birth to our cosmology. We extracted it out and negotiated it with nature, woven in the space between us and the chaos. At first, the gods were elemental things. They came as the miracle of birth, the dread of night, the bloody howling of the wolves, the furious lash of thunder and lightning, the wind at sea, the sandstorm in the desert, the mysterious ailments that robbed young and old and weak. It came as the sprouting of a seed, the hatching of an egg, the mindless ecstasy of orgasm. The gods were shapes half seen, more forces than true minds. They were the power that madness always seems to promise. They were nature's elementals. They demanded labor and offering, and they judged us. They gave and took in a manner raw and irrefusable. How could they not be gods? And so we named them, and in naming them we divided them out, looked at them, and thus we mastered them. It's always thus, isn't it? It's what every fairy tale teaches. You name a thing, you make it yours. So we named them deep earth divers, serpents in the void, the primal mother birthing life. We shaped them giants slain, their bones become the mountains, their blood become the rivers. We shaped them primal oxen licking salt, or cosmic eggs, or the joining of formlessness with form, the joining of masculine with feminine. We told how these things fragmented and multiplied, their children taking separate shapes, the shape of wind and flame and darkness, light and fear and storm. The first ones the Greeks named chaos or chasm, Gaia or earth, Tartarus or underworld, and Eros, desire. These and their first children we named, giving form and figure to the animal rawness that governs impulse before thought. Even as we began to understand what formed the winds and waves and fire, we found there was a dimension to our very own selves which we could not seem to control. We arrived upon more sophisticated gods, gods of anger, lust, jealousy, of love, of music, of gladness, of familial bonds, of drunkenness, of all other things that move us inwardly. The Olympians, maybe, more human, not true humans, but closer. Then we studied, and we storied closer. We classified the difference between zephyr and storm wind and sea breeze. We classified the northern, southern, eastern, western winds. We classified sleep and dream, daydream and nightmare. We got the minor gods, the demigods, just one step removed from human. When nature's power lies with mortal human, heroes are born, both glorious and cursed, fated for great deeds, but burdened by hubris, by envy, by the weight of expectation. These were our close reflections, our relations within nature and within ourselves. They had character arcs, they went on journeys, they had love triangles, they had objectives. We asked what it was to seek to bear the legacy of divinity, to dare to wrestle the self into submission, to align with something higher, and to dare dance with the powers that hold us in their sway. And so the gods became more human. They became personalities with structure and design. The cosmos is not mere disembodied forces. It is a battleground, and the spirits are at war. Malice contends with virtue, predator with prey. Caprice and impulse are not random but embodied, and they demand from us an endless, bloody, sweaty, fearful sacrifice. They seize us, compel us from some other realm, and suddenly the world is more than stick and stone and flowing water. For millennia, some combination of these gods was enough to sustain us as we grew and spread and intermingled. We were tribes, disparate and desperate, both predator and prey, who walked in families through a world of death and stranger. But it was enough, if not to unify completely, at least to stop us from complete dysfunction, as we fought for water and ecstasy and memory, as we fought for little discs of metal stamped one way or another way, for scraps of cloth cut and dyed just so. As we fight now for things even more imagined, things simulated by vast algorithms in secure rooms and white-walled buildings at the centers of our cities. Things simulated within each human brain as we look at a neighbor, a stranger, at pixels on a screen or smoke on the horizon. As we find ourselves compelled by greed and conviction and alliance, and future alliance, and probabilities so complex and multifaceted and, well, at the bottom maybe it's just water, food, sex. Maybe it's just power still in its various abstracted forms, woven and interwoven across the layers of neurology. But something in our story changes with these layers. We see an evolution towards gods with character and preference, less elemental, more structured and relatable. Sacrifices become more prayers and pleading, or perhaps not even pleading, but simple self-reflection. The pantheon of gods begins to attenuate towards one overarching ideal, one Allfather, something transcendent, flexible, abstract enough to unify us with our constant expansion, with our intermingling. It's no longer the expression of elemental nature, but rather the origin and embodiment of nature and its law. It's the engendering of nature as aligned with something higher. This is the monotheistic God, or the cosmic mind, or the beneficent conscious oneness. It's the interconnected pantheon of the Hindu, tapering still despite its countless faces towards some sort of oneness and some sort of hierarchy in its manifesting. A sort of circle is completed, or perhaps an upward spiral. We started with the elements, mere mindless forces, acting. From there, they separated into personalities, stepped down among us and competed, possessed us, and hurled us against one another at their whim and fancy. In some ways, these were the most human, but then they became less possessive, more relational. They became ideas to attend to, values with which we negotiate in the search for deeper freedom and self-actualization. Each layer more divorced from nature, yet each one a turning to the self. Each one a step both out and in. gazing into the well of our desires, seeing in everyone a stranger of strange values, a competitor for scarcity, yet when we plunge the dagger in, we realize it's a mirror. It's not a stranger, but a brother, and the brother is ourself. It's us in the mirror, and we are our brother. Maybe that's what we're realizing, I hope, with these endless layers of abstraction. Can we pray it is enough? Can we truly hack this universe's code, this code written in competition and in scarcity? In expanding our circle of brotherhood, in expanding that which is sacred to something even more abstract and fundamental, can we hope somehow to transcend? Or in abstraction, are we only making it more distant, more hazy, until the sacred has withered to a disembodied word, disembodied like when we say love or don't judge or forgive, but we say it utterly without context, without substance, without even acknowledging the questions, so many questions that we don't dare ask, much less answer. We used to answer some questions with child sacrifice or bigotry. Some answers were more rational, but we've decided many were not good. The models were too blindly sacrificial, too dogmatic. Cooperation was a better way, brotherhood was a better way, forgiveness, love, tolerance, tempering judgment with some sort of grace. These are better ways, if we are able. And technology has made us able. Somewhere in our search for truth, we developed this scientific method: skepticism and hypothesis, experiment and empiricism, theory. It's been a heartbeat in our human timeline. 2,000 or 400 or even 20 years, depending on how you want to measure. And in that time, the humility of theory has taken us incredibly far, compared to the dogma that it slowly seems to be replacing. But incredibly far towards what? This is the age in which we find ourselves, the furling back of faith and miracle, the bending to the microscope. This is the age in which we dissect, deconstruct, reduce everything to its fundamental particles, and we say, look, this is an electron, and if we say it spins like this, then the other spins like this, and the atom spins, and the molecule spins, and the planet, and the cosmos, and the colors of our mind as they interface with light. We have terabytes and exabytes and lullabites pouring out our ears, a flood of algorithms, calculations far beyond our ken, feeding us an endless frenzy, bit and impulse, open shut, ones and zeros switching, drowning us in endless light and spectacle, and yet we know nothing fundamental. We only describe the flow of awareness and fit it to our aims. What then are our aims? What should be our aims? For math and exploration we look forward, but for culture, value, story, are we looking too much back? What has happened to the scales which balance truth and love? This overarching aim our gods have come to represent. That science gives us understanding, we can have no doubt. But what of the other side? We tell stories of our stories of our stories, and it does have beauty, but in this age of physics and reductionism, will it be enough? The mathematics and the memory. If our scales are not balanced, if we don't nest true knowing with true goodness, can we hope for moksha, enlightenment, liberation, salvation? Can we hope for meaning? That's what cosmology was about, wasn't it? It's the grandest story we can aim for, which encompasses all others. We looked up into that void, pregnant with so many glittering and distant possibilities, and we sought meaning. Whether it's there, true, ordained by some consciousness or God, whether it's merely a trick of nature, some existential desperation brought about by evolution's mindless weave, whether it's some weaving of nature and therefore has become true as our awareness interfaces with this universe and knows this thing that we call life. Whatever the case, meaning is the network by which we frame our lives. Even if you choose some other goal, like nihilistic hedonism, you are doing so because your perception of the universe frames meaning in a certain shape. If understanding is the channel, meaning is the flow itself. If understanding is the flow, meaning is the place to which it goes. We name it, divide it up in different ways, manipulate it for our uses. This is why something like hunger has a different meaning than pain has a different meaning than longing, bitterness, failure, hope. Why all of these have a different meaning than that ultimate meaning, death. Or is it life? Death without consciousness is nothing, but it's difficult to imagine that an infinite, undying awareness might possibly experience meaning. Perhaps they're the same then, or so close to it as to be indistinguishable. Each seems not merely to complete or contextualize the other, each seems actually to be the structure, by which the other can emerge. If life is a tree, death is the soil and the rain. If life is the rain, death is the sun which dries it out. If life is the sun, death is the space where it is not, and it's in between, in the space of flux and balance, that we are able to emerge. So it's not all death and oblivion in the end. Not only. But that's what I suspect we might be fearing in this age of math and science. We might be fearing that it's all just noise or silence. Have we delved too deep? Have we stared too long into that abyss? We have realized that to see is to be blind. We begin to question the shapes our eyes interpret, the names our brain applies, the colors that are simply wavelengths, points upon a field, information in a stream. We've peeled it back and looked at the very heart of the universe, and we have found that we are rats running in a maze of bit and pixel. The particles that make us up were set in motion before the foundations of the world. The universe is a machine, and mathematics is its language. No great intent, no transcendent rhythm. Rhythm itself is simply as things appear to us, as our bodies have evolved to feel mathematics. Feeling itself, love itself, that highest thing of all, is it just causality cascading? Everything from the tiniest atom to the greatest supercluster is just another droplet in a mechanistic sea of particles expanding, cooling, interacting less and less and less, until there will be nothing, not even death. We fear that death itself becomes meaningless in this universe of absence. Death is simply the last cry of life's illusion, the last clinging to some spinning frame before consciousness becomes untethered. And yet, beyond dogma, beyond faith, beyond the categories we perceive, beyond the dread of knowing that we have created them, and we are nothing without them, beyond the dread of knowing we can only speak in words like paintings of a painting, beyond this, life is the experience. Yes, we are particles. Yes, we come from dust, and to dust we shall return. But ours is dust from the hearts of dying stars. We are not doomed to die in darkness. If it is a doom, it is a doom of burning. Beyond all this grave knowing, deeper than the deconstruction and the dread of illusion, there is life. Life not as a heartbeat so many times per minute, not as metabolizing oxygen, not as double helix separation, DNA assembly, not as ones and zeros in a program, not as synapses firing in a brain, not as hydrogen fusing into helium, fusing into lithium, all the way down to the carbon that makes up the center of our bodies. Beyond this, there is life. If consciousness is to be untethered, it shall be untethered not into suffering, not into boredom, not into meaninglessness. It shall be untethered beyond them all, into infinity, unaware of time and energy and separateness, consciousness disembodied. How can that possibly be a meaningless thing? How can that possibly relate to meaning in any way? In this untethering, it gives the measurable and finite a sense of infinite, indeed of universal meaning. The moment, the energy, the matter, the perception, indeed the very suffering, if these are the only things which distinguish something from the void of oblivion, if this finitude is what conceives of meaning, how can the experience of that finitude not be the most valuable thing? If we are truly alone in this universe, then nothing has experienced yet outside of us. 14 billion years of chemical formation, and we wake up and see those stars, and see that darkness, and we imagine possibility in the space between. Is this not a wondrous thing, that we might be a part of something so interconnected and so endlessly complex, and that we might be the experience of it? That more than the ever-stretching void, more than the cancerous mutation, more than the stars that will swallow up the earth, we are the ones who bring experience to this universe. We started with our elemental gods, and then our personalities, and then our personalities embodied, relational, attendant to some overarching aim. They grew grander, deeper, faster, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. God became the language of the universe, inevitability, the gods of math and reason and consciousness itself. He became both processor and code, the sculptor and the marble, the author and its story and its telling, all in one. Under a Daoist view, I might describe it as the natural way and the power that creates the way, and the knowing of the way. It is the path and the light that shows the path, and the walking of the path. It is the knowing and the mind that knows. The Buddhists would say it's that which sustains and defines reality, which includes suffering, and it is also that which allows the transcendence of suffering, making this gift of experience infinite and absolute. The Christians would say it's the beginning and the end, the logos of the universe, the embodiment of being, pure actuality, from him are all things, of him are all things, to him are all things. Beyond all passing things, consciousness remains, and for however long it does so, there is meaning in the universe. One can sit on the bank of a river, fold one's hands and close one's eyes, and do nothing more than breathe. If one does this properly, a universe of infinite and psychedelic variety opens to awareness. Whether random or determined, whether supernatural or utterly dependent on this natural frame, experience is revealed as self-fulfilling in these moments. The asking of the question is the answer. The turning to the moment is the satisfaction with the future. We are suspended here, between awareness and inevitability. We're suspended between nature and idea, between percept and the concept that we make it, and the pattern between all the concepts, and the math that undergirds it all. And now the age of math, the math that undergirds it all. Have we unraveled it all with this discovery? Has all this knowing really crushed the vivid poetry of our experience?
We fear to find ourselves reeling, falling, flailing in a sea of mechanistic particles. We fear to have exhausted the landscape of our world. We climbed the trees and ran the plains. We went from stones to spears to nuclear. We made love beneath the stars. We slew the mammoth in its fury. We dug lines upon the earth and planted seeds. We built our cities stone on stone. We built our altars, killed our lambs. We sprinkled blood and made our music. We danced and joined in psychedelic frenzy. We felt the rhythm of the tambour and the bangles. We harnessed the wind, we harnessed the lightning, we harnessed the sun and the blood of ancient beasts beneath the ground. Maybe that seems like an obvious statement, not an answer of any sort. Without consciousness, there is no meaning. Can this be the revelation waiting for us at the end? The simple recognition of our conscious landscape? Or are we looking in the mirror and simply reverberating again with recognition of our want and suffering? Are we simply reaffirming the question and our insufficiency? In some ways, this seems only to return us to that primal place, looking up into the stars, only now dreadfully self-aware, stripped of our stories and their powers, stripped of the personalities that weave between the world and our nature, stripped of our aims and the confidence that they were right. Nietzsche said, "He who fights with monsters might take care, lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." But today we have looked long into an abyss. We have looked with microscope and graph and surgeon's blade. We have quantified that darkness and translated it, until we were left with only ones and zeros on a paper, ifs and answers in their utter certainty, an endless cascade running down to the tiniest last bit of possible experience. We have looked into the abyss, and we have seen that even darkness was just a shadow of the mind. We have seen its every working. The monsters were not things to fight, but things to disassemble and pin up, to sketch out the bone and blood and sinew of the body of our spirit war, and to see that it too is merely code upon a double helix. We have peered into the abyss and been met by nothing at all. We have fallen face first and realized there is no abyss. It was always just a puddle, rainwater made by H2O precipitation, a puddle reflecting to our eyes the endless void through which we hurtle. And now we ask, is there no true or unique substance inside of us ourselves? Is that outer void enough to convict us of our lives? We have some questions here, and some answers that we toy with. Could the asking of the question be the answer? Does the thirst for meaning confirm its ultimate fulfillment? While consciousness remains, is there meaning in the universe? If not a truth, I suspect it's the beginning of one. The beginning of a question, certainly, and that's all we need, really. We need a sustaining question. Indeed, it's the question which sustains the framing by which, the values by which, the very language by which we grapple with our truth. That's what we'll explore in this series, in various video essays and conversations. We'll look at religion and its deconstruction, skepticism and its bounds, science and its nature. We'll look at conviction versus truth, at story and at mindfulness. We'll look at embodiment and ritual, at abstract and at study, and at how narratives are formed and framed. We need a cosmology for the age of science. Join me, and let's try to tease out some of the possibilities. That when we walk the hills, still we may tremble, because the stars are out there above us still, and still the songs can seize and lift us, and still our blood runs hot with something ones and zeros cannot capture.